I don't think there's any plant that has produced more anger than this yellow beauty. But is it more misunderstood than malignant? I'm John Robertson, the former poison garden warden at the Annick Garden, and this is the story of Senecio jacobaea, Ragwort. To understand why ragwort is harmful, we have to understand something about the mechanism of the poisons in it. They're what are called pyridizidine alkaloids, and they're hepatotoxic. That is to say, they can cause liver damage. Now, liver damage is cumulative. So if you eat ragwort, you will slowly build up liver damage, and eventually you reach the point where liver failure occurs. What happens then is that the liver produces ammonia, and that ammonia gets into the bloodstream, travels to the brain and causes brain damage. Horses that have been poisoned by ragwort exhibit what they call the sleepy staggers. They lose their coordination, become very drowsy and stagger around before they die. But there's something particular about ragwort which means that it's not as harmful as many people believe it is. It's very unpleasant to taste. If animals are in a field where there's grazing on ragwort, they will ignore the ragwort because they do not like the taste of it. But ragwort is one of those rare plants which is still poisonous when it's dead. So if ragwort is in a field that's used for haymaking and it gets into the hay, then it's lost the taste but not the toxins. And that's why ragwort is a particular problem for horses. Some people say ragwort is a problem for humans. They can be poisoned if they eat it, they can be poisoned if they touch it. Well, that's not true. It's been calculated that you would need to have something like 120 kilos of ragwort on your skin to be poisoned by it. So because ragwort's not a problem for humans, and because ragwort when it's alive is not a serious problem for animals, it's not as bad as many people believe it is. I've heard people say ragwort should be removed on site. I've heard people criticise the poison garden at Annick for even growing ragwort. Fact is, ragwort living, growing somewhere out where animals won't come in contact with it isn't doing any harm at all. It is only if it gets into feed for animals that it becomes a serious problem. That's not to say that people haven't died as a result of ragwort. They have. In New Zealand, ragwort was introduced in the 1800s and it became a serious problem. In the 1930s, they began using sodium chlorate to control it as a weed killer. But sodium chlorate is very volatile and it can be absorbed in cotton, and it makes that cotton explosive. And there were cases where people were killed after their clothes caught fire, having become contaminated with the sodium chlorate that was being used to control ragwort. It's interesting to note that in spite of this, they continued to use sodium chlorate until the mid-1940s when something better came along. They obviously considered it was more important to get rid of the ragwort than to worry about exploding trousers. So ragwort can be a very serious, harmful plant if it gets ingested by horses when it's in hay. But it's not as bad as many people would have you believe. I'm John Robertson, and if you want more information about poisonous plants, please visit thepoisongarden.co.uk.